You've studied journalism, been a screenwriter for comedy television, written columns for newspapers. After such varied experiences, what appealed to you about writing children's books?
Writing books really grew out of my screenwriting. I started out writing short comedy sketch sort of stuff, but gradually characters started lodging themselves in my imagination and demanding that I go on longer journeys with them and explore their bigger sort of stories. And I did that a few times for the screen. And I wrote a television film called The Other Facts of Life, which was an example of this sort of process. And a book publisher got hold of the screenplay and thought that as the TV film was going to be screened nationally, that a few people might want to read the story on the page. And to me, this was this invitation to turn the screenplay into a book was an opportunity that I hadn't been expecting, and I'd certainly never thought that I would write books because it seemed a bit scary, too many words and not great commercial prospects. But to have that offer made was an adventure that I took, and by the time I'd finished that first book, I knew that writing stories on the page was really what I was made for, and that's pretty much what I've done since.
How do you manage to maintain your offbeat style and sense of humour when writing about such tough, serious subjects?
Well, my stories are always told through the eyes and the heart of the main character, even if it's a third-person story. That's always, for me, the central focus. And I like writing stories about young people who are up against some pretty tough problems in their lives, and sometimes problems that are particular to them and their friends and family, sometimes problems that are bigger, more universal sorts of problems, but not problems that can be solved quickly and easily, particularly by young characters. So it's always important to me that I equip my young characters with as much personal resources as possible to... Otherwise, it would be unfair to have them facing such big problems. So optimism is present in just about all my young characters. And often humour, or the sort of humour I write, comes out of optimism coming slam up against some really big, grim aspects of life. But that optimism not being shaken, there's something about that often that when somebody's in the absolute thick of it, and I guess, for example, the two books I've written set in World War II, the young Jewish boy Felix, who's up against some of the really biggest problems that I've ever had characters face, his optimism, fueled by his imagination, which is another sort of universal resource that we all have, but that my young characters use often, the stories he tells himself. And that uncrushed optimism, it always makes me smile just when I think of it, and there are many instances of it through the books that I think make readers smile or even laugh sometimes, even in the midst of such a grim story environment.
You have received many prestigious awards over your career. What part do awards play in a creative career?
Well, this whole business of writers' awards is a kind of vexed one, really, because on the one hand, everybody loves to be recognised and praised, but awards aren't really central to what writers are all about, and they can actually be a bit destructive, because the way I look at it is that for every time an award's given, there's a wonderful sense of pride and affirmation, and sometimes undisciplined partying on the part of a few lucky recipients. And there's a much larger amount of anything ranging from disappointment to a mild sense of injustice to an even milder sense of, oh, maybe my characters and the way I'm relating to them is not functioning as well as it should, and that's terribly unfair on characters who can't themselves do anything really to get awards. So what I'm saying really is that I would probably prefer that we live in an award-free world in terms of awards as we know them. I've never really felt that 6 or 7 adults sitting together in a room and through huge energy and dedication, reading vast numbers of books and making some personal judgments about those books, on balance, contributes a huge amount that's particularly helpful to the business of creating the very best Australian children's books. But I can see that from a marketing point of view and from a kind of giving children's books a bit more cultural status, the media likes awards because it's kind of news, albeit manufactured news. So although I've just talked myself out of ever, receiving another CBC shortlist ever in my career, I have to say honestly that I think the CBC does wonderful work, and but handing out awards is probably not the most helpful work they do. The awards, of course, that kids authors love to get are the ones voted for by young readers. And while I'm always deeply grateful to every young reader whoever votes for me, in a sense, what they're doing is a little bit redundant, because the real reward for me is when a young reader picks up one of my books and chooses to read it all the way through to the end. And then the bonus is if they choose to tell me how they thought and felt while they were reading it.